Maria Kelson, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you on. I was absolutely thrilled when I saw that announcement come over on social media about the deal with Crooked Lane and for your book, The White Redwood. And so I was just very eager to have you on.
I appreciate that. Yep, you've known me since that book was a twinkle in my eye.
Which was not last week.
That's right. It was about 10 years ago.
Well, we'll talk about that decade-long process. Why don't we just start, if you don't mind? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you currently live, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I currently live in central Kansas. I've lived here since 2019, so not too long. Before that, I was in Colorado for 10 years. And my background, originally as a writer, I wrote essays and poetry, and I published a couple of books of poetry. And somewhere in the 2010, 2011, 2012 range, I got really seriously interested in writing nonfiction, writing a novel. And so the project that just got accepted was started around that time. And in the meantime, I had, during the poetry years, I had written short stories every now and then, once in a very blue moon. But I've tried picking up the pace on short story writing during this noveling period as well for I guess I didn't want to lose touch with a sense of being able to complete shorter projects and to enjoy the kind of the way that you can hold a shorter project all in your head all at once. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to keep that going as well at the same time that I was working on the novel. But yeah, originally I was focused on poetry and essays to some degree. So that was the switch.
Yeah. And how about professionally?
Yeah, most of my professional years have been in education or higher education. I have taught English at the college level for many years, and now I'm on the student support side, student and faculty support side, but I'm still in higher ed. So that's been most of my professional career, with a few sort of loop-de-loops here and there into other fields, but the bulk of it has been in colleges.
Yeah. And can you say what college you're connected with now?
Yeah, I'm at Hutchinson Community College in Hutchinson, Kansas.
Yeah. How do you like that area?
Yeah, I like it. I like smaller towns. So it's about 40,000, and you can decide to go to a movie 10 minutes before you want to go to it and get a seat.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case in Mancos too, where you are.
Well, the only issue being that we have to drive 20 minutes either way to get to the town where the movie might be showing. But
Okay.
pretty much that's the case. And actually the only other benefit in Mancos and movie wise is we just started a cult movie federation of Mancos, where we're screening monthly cult movies in the Opera House here, and that's been a blast.
Oh, I bet you had a hand in that madness.
Maybe.
Stirring up trouble in small town USA.
Yeah, wasn't my idea, but I jumped right on that.
It sounds great.
Train. Yeah,
it sounds really great.
Yeah. So, well, in addition to all that, you have been, I hope I use this term in a good way, you've been floating in and out of writing organizations in Colorado. That's where we met. And I remember one wonderful trip down to Santa Fe. You and I drove together to go to was it Santa Fe or Albuquerque? I think it was Albuquerque for a writing conference, a day or a day and a half down there. And you were a big help to me in evaluating a manuscript or two. I'm trying to remember, but you have a really sharp eye and an empathetic way of approaching a reading for somebody like me in terms of putting prose together. So obviously you care about fiction and writing a great deal with your poetry and short stories. So take us back to the spark for this novel, The White Redwood. This idea obviously meant a lot to you, and you have really stuck with it, which is saying something.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it, that if it's being worked on for that long, it must mean something to the author. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess a couple of, now that it's been through a number of drafts, some of the things that have persisted through all those drafts are probably the seeds that first interested me. So one of them is the setting, which is the redwood forest in the far north coast in California. And I grew up in a suburban area in the Bay Area, so that's several hours drive from the far north coast. So that was always a sort of a reachable but just barely reachable land of marvels in terms of family road trips. So that made a big impression on me that has stayed with me all my life. The sort of potential for one, encountering the majesty of nature, and then two, for people to hide and deeds to be hidden in the redwood forest. So the setting has been the same through all those drafts. Setting was important to me, and the core relationships have been the same. So it focuses on a mother and a son, and parenting has been a big part of my adult life. I became a parent at the very start of my adult life, so I don't really know what it's like to be an adult and not also be a parent. And so the main character's relationship to her son, and the way that he's thrown in jail accused of murder, and she has to find the real killer to free him. And so the idea of someone being motivated in that way has been there all along. So I think those are the two things that drove me, this idea of the extreme motivating force that parenting can be, and this setting that I really loved.
Yeah. Can you remember the exact moment, day, situation where this novel idea dropped into your head?
I don't know if it was this novel. I don't know how far away the journal musings would be, but I remember what, from those core elements. But I do remember, I don't even know, it's, how do we say it?
Yeah.
Like, I remember coming on the garden plot that would eventually grow this novel. So
That's a good metaphor. That's a
so
good
I
metaphor.
came on the garden plot in
Yeah.
the Colfax tattered cover in Denver, Colorado. And that was back when there were only 3 tattered cover locations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I drove up from Pueblo. That was a 2-hour drive, and that's where we had lived for 10 years. And I drove up from Pueblo expressly to go to this reading by Alice LaPlante.
Hmm.
And I think it was called Turn of Mind. She has a mystery suspense novel. And her premise was that a woman is trying to solve a murder, but she happens to be a woman who is suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. So she has some distortions in her reality, but she has to solve this murder. And I was so captivated by what Alice was doing. And interestingly, Alice had come from what some would consider a literary background. She had studied writing in college, and she said she had written, lots of literary short stories that had never gone anywhere, and she wanted to explore crime fiction to basically reach an audience. And the way she conceptualized having a novel with a murder as a launching point was also really helpful to me. She said the murder at that event, she said, the murder was a trail of breadcrumbs into a world I couldn't otherwise enter. And that really lit something up in my brain hearing that.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and I
great.
think
Yeah.
on that same trip, I was, sort of on fire with mysteries and thrillers. I was interested in the genre before that event. That's why I drove up for that event. But I was kind of like, testing out this idea of like, is this the world I want to dive into? And as I was browsing through the mystery section, I came on one of the Easy Rollins books by Walter Mosley. I think it was book 4, The White Butterfly. And reading The White Butterfly was like totally sealed the deal in terms of, yes, I want to do this. Um, and so that's where I came upon the garden plot and I saw it and I grabbed my garden tools.
Yeah. Wow.
Was there a
Well,
moment for you where Allison was born? Allison Coyle, your first big protagonist?
yes, and it was a galvanizing moment.
Ah,
I think I've used that expression before because it is just seared in my brain
ah,
at a point where it is back to the mid 1990s where I had written a couple of mysteries. I had good agents for both of them. They were both urban kind of crime, typical crime
ah,
novels that are still, especially the first one, I think is still viable. But I always thought of crime and mysteries as sort of city things. And there I was with my wife on a day-long horseback ride in the Flat Tops Wilderness on a July afternoon with about 8 or 10 other summertime riders, full day horseback ride way up in the mountains. And our guide was this young woman who was so enthusiastic about every aspect of her job. And she knew so much about the outdoors and she knew so much about the territory, the setting. The setting
yeah.
was key. And then she said she was also a hunting guide. And I just, it was one of those, it may not have been that moment, but by the end of the day, I was fixated on this idea of a female hunting guide as a main character for a series. Well, at the
Ah,
time, I thought it'd be one book, but it turned out to be five. So,
right,
yeah. But
right.
I like that idea of a garden plot because character setting, just what are the elements that kind of pull it all together? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for
That's great.
sure.
So did you use a real town in the Redwood in Northern California? Did you place your characters in a real town or did you make one up?
Yeah, they're in a real town. They're in Eureka. And in Humboldt County, that's one of the two bigger towns. The other one is Arcata, where Humboldt State University is located. Um, I guess I liked the idea of having it in a real, I mean, there are other towns in Humboldt County, but those are probably
Yeah.
the two bigger, two more well-known. I believe Eureka is the county seat, the courthouse and jail are there. Um, I liked the idea of having some real geographical markers. I get maybe because I had been used to writing essays, I liked, and poetry that was based on nature to some extent. I liked the idea of having touchstones in the real world, which
Yeah.
may be
Yeah.
similar to you too, as Allison travels through real passes and real valleys and
Yep. Yeah.
encounters with the
Kind of
weather.
kind of grounds it for me. It kind of gives it a real grounding that I kind of like.
Yeah,
And then, if you use real towns, you can always put a building in there if you need a building to be in a certain spot. I mean,
right.
readers will go with you. And
You
yeah.
know what's interesting hearing you describe Allison is how the person who inspired her was someone that you really admired because you were having this experience with her and her expertise was on, full display. So you started from this place of admiration and that really shows, when I read the Allison Coyle books that this is someone that readers can admire for her expertise and for her ease in situations that not all of us would be easy in. The reason I bring that up is because, now that I'm in edits,
Yeah.
there's a couple of areas where my protagonist, I didn't start out making her someone to be admirable, but some of the suggestions are about ways to make her more admirable. So that's really thought provoking to me. I'm kind of chewing on that now in terms of, okay, how much of the characters I read are they characters that I admire? How much of a part of my experience as a reader is that? So I just wanted to bring that out because that was so clear in the way you described Allison's
Yeah.
original model.
Yeah. That's a great subject for discussion, I think, at or maybe a workshop in terms of, and it's interesting that you bring up Walter Mosley, because a lot of his protagonists are not so admirable and are doing
Exactly.
questionable things right out of the gate.
Yes.
These are people who are taking the law into their own hands. And I think in general that we want our readers to be empathetic with our main characters at the beginning before we put them through hell and drag them through the mud and make them make tough decisions that are going to be compelling for the reader to follow along in that decision-making process. So to the extent that they are a little bit self-aware and savvy about their environment, and also if they have a clear, to me, this is just, there's a million different ways to go, but if they have a clear sense of what they want and how they're going to get there, I think that makes for an empathetic main character, or somebody that the readers can hitch their wagon to that protagonist, because they are showing that they are, at least following their own path through the world as best they can, and being somewhat, at least making good decisions at the beginning.
Yeah. I do like characters that I can empathize with, that they have problems and I understand what they're trying to do to solve those problems. But I don't know that I'm always reading, a main character who I would consider a role model for my nieces and nephews.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And Allison is maybe a little too good at first in general. She's pretty neutral, kind of. She's a hunting guy, but she's not really somebody who loves hunting. She just loves the fact that being a hunting guy gets her outdoors. She definitely will push hard when the time comes, and she's tough in terms of outdoor survival and things like that.
What
But
about your baseball protag? Role model?
well,
Not a role model?
Frank Ryder in The Fireballer is a role model in terms of his dedication to the sport, his
Yeah.
dedication to his passions,
Yeah.
his dedication to being a decent human being. I think he
Yeah.
is a decent human being, but he is someone who hasn't yet wrestled with all the inner demons that are really gnaw at him. And but he bottles that all up inside, and we see him bottle it up inside, and then it explodes. About halfway through the book, there's something where it comes crawling out of him like the monster in the Alien, and right out of his guts. And once it's exposed, he feels very vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, like he's never felt before, and that destroys his ability to deliver on his talents. But I think he still maintains a likable. He may be just a little bit too stoic, but that's part of the plot. He just becomes he just goes further inside himself before finally finding that release.
Yeah, I think that's an important option to keep on the table for writers with protagonists who start out admirable, is the option of ripping their guts off by destroying their sense of who they think they are.
There you go. Yeah.
I think that's a good option to keep on the table. I'm thinking of this book is one I read, I think it was this year, The Infinite Blacktop.
Oh, wow.
Derek Ron, and we read it in my mystery book club that I attend at the local library here. And it was not widely liked by the book club, but I really loved it. So I guess I would say I like reading all kinds of protagonists. I like reading protagonists that start out admirable, but I also like reading protagonists that start out a complete hot mess. This one is one of those.
That's great. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a good hot mess. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. That's great. Well, so you come up to tattered cover. You discover the garden plot. Give us the sort of the big chunks of timeline here. How long did it take you to complete a draft.
Yeah.
At that point, did you start to look for an agent? Did you start to look for a publisher? Did the book then kind of go underground for a while? Did you keep working on it? Did you keep networking out there trying to find a home for it? Cover those 12 or so years since
Yeah,
you
right.
started writing it, and tell us how this all happened.
Yeah, probably around year 2 or 3, I showed a draft to my writing group. I had a critique group at the time that I had been sharing other things with, poetry and short stories and all that. So I think at that time I called that one draft 2. So no, I didn't show draft 1 to anybody.
Yeah.
Draft 2, yeah, I went to the writing group and a few other readers, and I got some great feedback. And then maybe draft 5 or 6, I sent to a couple of agents. I got, and the reason there were so many drafts between draft 2 is especially since I was teaching myself how to write a novel, I could only focus on one type of change in each draft. Couldn't tackle all editorial problems at once.
Yeah.
So draft 5 or 6, I started sending to a couple of agents, maybe 3. I got a couple of no's and one expression of interest, but she was very enthusiastic about sending me edits up through what amounted to the first 2 or 3 chapters. And then she kind of said, I can't read this anymore unless you do these and such edits. And the edits she suggested weren't that meaningful to me. They didn't click for me. I understand how they would make a better type of book for readers with a certain type of preference, but it didn't move me. I guess I wasn't that type of reader. So we discontinued our correspondence. And let's see. I'm trying to think how it all sorts out. So somewhere in there, I also sent it to some readers who live in Humboldt County to get some kind of ground truthing. So that was really helpful. Based on some research trips I had done to the area while I was writing. And then somewhere around maybe draft 7, I sent it to another agent that I had been recommended to, and she sent me back some very specific edits that I did click with, that I thought, oh yeah, I could instantly see how they would make the book better. But then it took another 2 years to work on those because I was teaching myself how to write a novel. And then while I was sort of polishing those up to resend to her, I also started working with a screenwriting consultant as kind of a book doctor or a private editor. Because I realized there were still some things about character motivation, I guess I would say, that I just wasn't getting. Like I feel like going from poetry to novel writing is like going from maybe playing the violin to playing the tuba, and then also conducting the orchestra at the same time.
Yeah,
So there were a lot of skills that I needed to develop, even though I could read music. I knew what a melody was. So
right.
So some of that character stuff, I thought, I just don't get it. And let me tell you what, working with the screenwriting world really opened my eyes. Just the way screenwriters, you may have encountered this too, the way screenwriters talk about characters and talk about characters in scenes is so different from anything I'd encountered in a fiction workshop before. That's what really made it click. I go, oh, that's how all those pieces fit together.
Yeah. I've been listening to a screenwriting podcast for years and years and years and years.
Oh,
I've
good.
never written one screen
Yeah, me neither. I have no desire to do it. Yeah.
No, but I love listening to these guys talk.
Yeah.
It's called Script Notes. Script Notes is the name of the
Huh.
podcast. And Craig Mazin is one of the guests. He wrote The Last of Us. He wrote Chernobyl. John August has written some fiction, the other host, and he has written some really big time movies. And they're just great talking
Yeah.
about characters and
Oh, yeah.
scenes and building stuff. So anyway, I totally relate to that comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was so
So,
helpful.
but I don't want to lose track of the thread here.
Yeah.
So you had this agent who gave you some feedback. It took you 2 years.
Yeah.
Did that agent stay with you as you made progress with those changes?
No, I had asked her, do you want to see, like the first 50 pages or whatever? She said, no, just wait till it's all done. So, okay, I had a day job and kids at home and was writing other things, writing short stories and all that jazz. So, okay, 2 years later.
Yeah.
So I sent it to her and she ended up passing actually.
Oh, wow.
I know, which was funny.
Wow.
I didn't mind because by then I had 10 plus years of hanging out in fiction writers organizations to learn that, like, in a way it's kind of roll with the punches in terms of your career developing.
Yeah.
It only takes one yes. So then I queried other agents and that led to having this current contract and this current agent.
And can you want to talk about your agent and talk about the contract, or tell us when the book will come out?
Yeah, sure. Her name's Lisa Avalera, and she's from the Bay Area in Northern California, like me. So that's
nice.
kind of neat. So have that connection with your business partner.
Yeah.
And she is particularly interested in representing writers of color. So that was important to me. I am Mexican American, and she has had a couple of nice wins the last few years in the speculative fiction world too. I know some of your listeners write horror and sci-fi, so she also is interested in those genres too. So she had some nice sort of succinct comments on the manuscript. So I made a few changes based on her input as well. And then I'm thrilled that the editor I'm working with is someone I actually met from back when I was in the poetry world. We attended a poetry reading together many years ago and met. And Toni Kirkpatrick, she's the acquiring editor at Crooked Lane, who I'm working with. And
that's amazing.
I know, kind of a nice small world moment. And she's wonderful.
Wow.
Her books are really great. She's been in mysteries for years. Some of your listeners might be Toni Kirkpatrick authors. She used to edit for St. Martin's and then mysteries also, and then came over to Crooked Lane.
Wow. So and back to your agent just real quick, was that just a cold query or was that through networking?
That was also through networking. Yeah. I maybe out of maybe like 11 or 12, somewhere in 12 to 15 queries, maybe like 3 of them were completely cold. The rest of them, I mean, that's the other nice thing, as your listeners will know, about having years and years and years with writers organizations, is there's often somebody who knows somebody who had such and such good experience with someone somewhere. So
yeah, it's absolutely true. Yep, for sure. So I mean, I've got to ask the obvious question, the typical reporter question.
Sure.
Maria, how does this feel after all these years? That there must have been times where you thought this will never see the light of day.
It's funny. It wasn't that I thought it would never see the light of day in my darkest moments. I would say my darkest moments were, there's some way I can push this rock up the hill, but I'm not sure how many people are going to be pushing with me. So it was just a stunning feeling to have an ally and an agent and an ally and an editor, and people who have no reason to blow sunshine up your rear. People whose only interest is the hard, cold question, will people buy this book?
Yep.
And they thought yes.
How long was it between getting your agent and finding Crooked Lane?
Um, not terribly long in publishing terms, maybe a few months before
Oh,
that was
that's
yeah,
quick.
before that
Yeah.
was all settled. Yeah.
Uh,
And yeah, so how it felt was I mean, I was yeah, you hear this all the time at conferences and whatever, but it is worth it. It is worth trying.
Yeah.
It is worth trying, even if it's been so long, and even if, even if you have no idea if anybody's going to bite or not, it is definitely worth trying because oh, the elation was just unbelievable. It was like uh being at the top of a roller coaster before you're about to take a really big drop, that kind of like
Yeah.
floating feeling.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Were you tempted at all to look at self-publishing at any point, or just you were on that traditional publishing path?
Yeah, I hadn't ruled it out. That was the sense of like, okay, one way or another, this boulder is going to get up the hill, and if I'm the only one pushing it, that would be
Yeah.
okay too. Self-publishing has been around long enough that well, I should say it not has been around. It's been around as long as there's been the printing press, but
Yeah.
um, in the recent publishing cycles, it's kind of gone
Mm,
around from being kind of niche and fringe to being,
right.
to being something that you can have any kind of experience with. Someone can have
Yeah.
a fantastic experience and put out a great book, or there can be crap, and there can be crap in the traditional published world too. So,
Right.
so yeah, so I never ruled it out. And I like to kind of listen in on conversations, podcasts, conference sessions, etc., by people who are really committed to the self-publishing world, because they are so smart about how to reach an audience. So I appreciate all the work in the trenches that goes
Yeah. Yeah.
into building careers that way.
Yeah. So why can you tell us what the title, The White Redwood, means? Could you give us a hint on that? And this has been the title all along. I think I remember that title from when you described it. Maybe not.
It may have, yeah. I know the 8 drafts have have had,
Yeah.
maybe 3 or 4 titles altogether.
Okay.
It may have been a
Okay.
title you heard before,
Yeah.
and we're at a point in the publishing process where it may not be the title that's on the shelf.
Yeah. That's I hate to see that. Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what all comes out. But anyway, where it came from, uh, there is such a being. There are
Ah.
white redwoods growing in the redwood forest, and they're a genetic anomaly, and their needles are white. They're very striking, but very rare. And they are, I guess they're not as thoroughly scientifically studied as your average redwood would be. But one thought is that they are all dependent on their parent tree. So they get their nutrients from a parent tree that they're attached to, because they can't
Oh.
photosynthesize. So there's a parent-child relationship,
Yeah.
the cool redwood forest being, and it does eventually figure into the plot.
Yeah. That's great. Wow. And when will it be out?
Fall of 2024. We don't have a date, but we have a season.
Yeah. That's great. And is there another book that you've been working on in the meantime, or is this a one book deal, or do they have an option for a second?
It is a 1 book deal, and they do have an option for a second. So for your listeners that are early on and starting out, I didn't know all these details. So
Yeah.
they can either buy the second book. I'm not talking to you, you know all this, but talking to you, some of your listeners, they can either buy the second book when they buy your first book, or they can say they have the option to see your
Mhm.
second book. And so in my case, I need to submit a proposal for the second book, but we're going to get through edits first.
Yeah.
So yes, it is supposed to have a second. It is supposed to, there are some plot holes. They're not giant, but there are
Yeah.
some. I'm thinking of like the the most giant plot hole. Did you read the first Tana French novel? And I don't remember the name of the.
Yes,
You know what I'm
yes, I
talking
read
about?
the
The
first
kid.
one.
He comes.
Yeah.
He regains consciousness, and there's blood in his shoes, and he can't figure out what happened, and that
Yeah.
never gets resolved in the first book.
Yep.
Talk about reader frustration. So it's not a plot hole of that magnitude, but there is room for a second in a series. But I do also have a standalone I want to get going on too. So
Yeah.
now, what was it like for you going from a series to a standalone?
Yeah, strange, and especially
Strange.
yeah, especially, well, not writing crime fiction was the bigger switch, to go out of the crime fiction kind of standard beginning, middle, and end kind of protagonist, antagonist, murder mystery kind of setup.
Mhm.
That was a very daunting leap. But on the other hand, I would never have been able to have written a standalone contemporary general fiction without having written those mysteries, and
Oh, interesting.
kind of learned about tension and
Yeah.
suspense and keeping reader interest and things like
Yeah.
that. I think it really helped out
Interesting.
a lot. But
Yeah. Yeah,
so
you
but
make a good point. Not only were you moving from series to standalone, but you were moving from knowing your readers' expectations to some degree to basically you're creating your readers' expectations, right? And
right,
then in a
yeah,
general book, yeah.
yeah, and moving into a kind of a subgenre of baseball novels where there's certain expectations in terms of just being able to talk about the sport comfortably, but also, as my agent told me at the very outset of writing the book, he said it just can't be only about baseball. It's got to be about a lot more than that. And
Okay.
he was right. It had to be at least 50% something else. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's an interesting thing that I'm discovering too, is like there are like developmental conversations you can have with an agent. It's not just you alone in your office with your
you.
animals, your cats and your dogs.
No, I just met with my agent in San Diego at BoucherCon, and either was that August or September, and I brought 3 ideas to him, and
Hmm.
he spent 20 minutes, which sounds like not very much time, but he's a quick study.
Yeah.
And he immediately just picked one of those 3 cards I held up for him. I held up
Yeah.
3 cards,
Yeah.
and he just plucked one, and he said, "This is the right one to work on." So
Oh, wow. So
yeah,
now
and
you have homework for
yeah,
the next
yeah, yeah, yeah.
several months
Oh
slash.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
So you were really, well, you had 3 ideas for this would be your next book.
Well, the next book is another standalone. That's done. This
That's
is the
done.
book. Yeah, this
Turn
is the
that in.
book after. Yeah, this is another standalone that my agent Josh has already liked the first draft. He had me make a few changes on the ending, and
Uh-huh.
I think it's about ready to go to my editor.
Oh, cool.
And so this would be the third book in the kind of not series, but they'd be sort of connected in terms of stories about the human condition kinds of stuff.
Okay,
So
so a third
yeah,
standalone,
a
basically.
third standalone,
Okay, so
maybe with some big thematic things you could look at in the
uh-huh.
long run, but
Yeah, yeah,
they aren't tied together.
yeah. So you came to him and you had 3 ideas that you would have been perfectly happy to like hook yourself to the machine and drain your
Yeah,
essence to create any of these
yeah.
3. And he picked, and that's the direction you're going. That is so cool to me. That is so cool.
And he picked the right one, because I'm really energized. I mean, his endorsement, of course, meant a lot. Um, and I can see why he picked it, and he explained why he rejected the
Ah,
others.
ah,
And they might be developable down the road, but
yeah.
the third one is, I'm really synced up with it. So
Nice.
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's just so exciting to know that
yeah,
it's another one of those moments of somebody who has no reason to just make you feel good for the sake of making you feel good. He's going to say this won't work or this will work. And so you
yep,
can trust him when he says this will work. He really believes it.
yeah, yeah. No, he does, and he has to. Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
that's great.
So you will find, I think, for me, just getting that agent support and backing, and just your network, just your professional network just becomes so strong and so really, really helpful. Yeah. You'll find the same thing.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's great to put it.
Maria, we could talk all day. This has been great. I just love talking to you. I'm so happy for you. This really is just so fantastic. We always like to wrap up with giving our guests a chance to promote a book or a writer, and I know you're prepared.
Yes. So on the mystery and suspense side, something I loved that I read in the last year was Beware the Woman by Megan Abbott. She's a great suspense writer and well known in some circles, but I would say not well known enough still to some degree.
She's a big name, though. She's a big name in the mystery writing community. But
exactly. If you hit the conference circuit, you definitely know who she is.
Yeah. She's very unassuming and low key, but she just turns out thriller after thriller. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other one is a newer writer and a different genre. So I've been reading more horror in the last few years. And so this is the horror novel, and it is This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. And so that's Gus, Gus, and then Moreno, Moreno. This Thing Between Us. It is about, in part, a haunted Alexa.
That's great. Wow. And it's an interesting cover comparison between that one and the other one you held up.
That's right.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting.
Very stripy psychedelic covers.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, we wish you well, and maybe we can do this again right around publication time next fall and look back on what you've how that last 8 or 9 months is, 10 months, whatever it might end up being. We can talk about the journey to finally getting it in print, and what it's like to hold advanced copies and all that good stuff.
That would be awesome. According to your podcast presenters, that's awesome too.
Yeah. All right, Maria, thank you so much for your time today, and we will catch up with you, as I like to say, down the road.
All right, terrific, and congrats on your second standalone coming out. Do you have a season or a date for that?
No, I mean, Josh, my agent, has to send it to my editor first.
Okay.
So but you could sprinkle a little fairy dust on that if you want to.
Right. A little good luck dance.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right.
Thanks,
Well, great.
Maria.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.